Well, this was not my plan today. I last year, once in a while, I did report on the Fed's reporting, but I kind of given up on that because the Fed reporting became so boring, and I was expecting boring today. And in many regards, it was boring, except that in a couple of regards, it wasn't, and that's why I'm doing this rant. This was by far the stupidest, most ridiculous Fed press conference I have ever heard. And it wasn't just because of the Fed chairman, it was because of the questions asked. I'm often quite impressed by some of the questions and whether that the financial press has a clue about how things work. But today it was sad. It was biased politically. Usually I don't see as much bias, but the questions that were asked were clearly biased. You could feel the tension in the questions as they were asked in terms of, the president being the bad guy and Powell not necessarily the bad guy, but not necessarily the good guy either, but definitely this slanted approach. And then the financial knowledge I mean, I guess these people know something, but the questions they didn't ask drove me nuts. So, in no particular order, I'm just going to go through this. Number one, not once, housing was mentioned three times. Not one single person said with rents coming down. There was just an article just came out just a little while ago. I'll probably talk about it with Brian later in our meeting around 5 o'clock. Um, uh, this was talking about rents being down again in June, and the rents are down year to date. The housing market is down year to date. When I say down, year over year price increases continue, but they're continuing at a much lower level. And a huge percentage of the country at this point, pricing is actually down. Houses are standing around, not being purchased. I know this from multiple conversations I've had about this coast to coast, including my own backyard in California, but also on the East Coast. The Northeast seems to be holding up, I guess, but that's the only place. So the housing pricing coming down, rental prices coming down, which might not show up in the CPI for a while, still it should be an indication to Powell that we're heading towards that 2% or even lower. No one asked him, not one single person asked about the impact of tariff income on inflation or the reduction in government spending on inflation. Because you see, Powell knows this. He has said it before. There's only two ways that inflation really, really actually happens, and that is money printing and lack of productivity. Other than that, you can have price increases. You can have shocks to the system, like oil price jumps because of the OPEC folks or whatever. Those are prices. Those are not inflation. Now they can get inflation generated, but it's always going to come down to productivity and money printing. And so if you've got the government spending less and getting more revenues in, that means less requirement to print money, unless the government prints the money because it wants to stimulate, which can happen when there is the situation demands it. So what we've got right now is that major question not asked, because if you're looking at inflationary pressures going downstream, that would be a huge part of the inflationary pressure would be the government printing money. The financial press, like I said, they showed their bias just in the way the questions were asked. If you don't believe me, go listen to the whole thing. Let me know in the comments below if you think that the press was acting in a biased way. One of the ways that they were biased is all they talked about was tariffs, 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 tariffs. That was the main subject matter. And yet Powell himself, go back 4 meetings. I want to say go back 4 meetings. Powell himself said that he thought that the committee thinks that the impact of tariffs will be about 0.6%. He said 3 times today that it's probably transitory. Not only probably that the base case was it's a one-time thing and it will not impact long-term, but that it could. A 0.6% increase in prices might start a round of price inflation. I just don't see what he's talking about. But he did say that it's transitory. And he did say in a previous meeting, it's probably about 0.6%. My number is 0.4%, but I'll take 0.6%. That'll be fine. If at the end of the year, we would have been at 2.0, and instead we're at 2.6. The Fox guy, he says, hey, I thought you paid most attention to the last 6 months, and the last 6 months has been flat. So when you're looking at year over year, yeah, you're seeing this 2.7, 2.8 on the CPI and the core CPI. But if you're looking at the last 6 months, no, you're seeing very, very, very low inflation. I don't have the number in front of me, but it's all, but PCE is practically zero. I'm sorry, PPI is practically zero. Then he says, hey, services are in check, but the price of goods is going up. But he didn't mention the fact, as he has in the past, that the services represents over 60% of the economy and the goods only represent around 30% of the economy. Why didn't he mention that this time? So if you got 60% of the economy with inflation in check, or maybe even going below the 2% level, and you got the goods side of the economy coming up, and maybe it's a little bit above 2%, but it's only 30% of the economy, that would be a signal to me. Or what am I getting wrong here? Let me know in the comments where I'm wrong here as I continue the rant. Not a single person brought up AI. AI never made it into the conversation. Tariffs are this horrible thing that's happening right now. We have to really pay attention to what's happening with tariffs, but we don't have to pay any attention to what everybody I know in finance believes is the number one most important thing happening right now in the economy, which is AI. That's not important. They're not going to say, well, what about the impact of AI? Won't that be killing jobs in the future? Shouldn't we be front running that and possibly getting some stimulus, or at least not being restrictive in the economy when AI is going to be killing jobs, already is killing jobs? Should that have been part? Or how about the other side of it? Is AI going to create all this productivity, and all the productivity is going to drive down inflation? We know how productivity drives down inflation, right? I hope you all know that. The television hanging on my wall right now, this massive television sitting here, the 78 that only cost me $1,000 a year and a half ago, just saw it over at Costco the other day for $690. How does that happen? Oh, productivity. What about no mention of increasing savings? Everybody's talking about, some people say, the consumer is under strain. And I'll say, no, the consumer isn't. The banks are saying the consumer's in great shape. They look at credit cards, they look at credit card payments, the consumer's in great shape. Oh, Powell also mentioned the consumer is getting a bigger real paycheck. Unlike under Biden, that you have an increased paycheck. No, it's the inflation rate is at 2 and whatever, and the paychecks are going up at 4. So you have this fast increase in real income for the consumer. And what does real income to the consumer do? It allows them to spend and also put money in savings. But nobody mentioned the fact that the consumers are savings. The savings rate has gone up. No one asked about other sources of inflation information in the numbers. Atlanta Fed just said it's at 2.25. Well, if the Atlanta Fed says it's at 2.25, do you think somebody should have said, hey, Chairman Powell, the Atlanta Fed just said it's at 2.25. Shouldn't that have impacted your decision over the last couple of days? What about the realflation? I'm sorry, trueflation. Powell has mentioned trueflation. I want to say that was about 6 meetings ago. So apparently he's looking at trueflation, and that's much more current and immediate information. Whether or not this is good, I don't know. But he mentioned that he's using it. Kathy Wood is using it. Other people are looking at trueflation. Trueflation's right at 2. Right at 2. How come nobody in the meeting said, now, Fed chair, several meetings ago, you mentioned that you pay attention to trueflation. Well, trueflation's at 2%. Why wouldn't he ask that? Why wouldn't anybody ask that thing? Why did somebody said, well, we need the mortgage rates to come down, so you need to cut rates so that mortgage rates come down. Anybody that's in finance should know the Fed has almost nothing to do. And that's what Powell said back. He says, we don't have much to do with mortgage rates. The overnight Fed rate not going to impact your house mortgage, but it will impact your car interest rate. It will impact your credit card interest rate. It will impact you if you have a adjustable mortgage, where the adjustment in your mortgage might be made by virtue of the Fed rates. Some of them are set up that way. So yes, he does have some impact, and he was right to say he has some impact. But nobody said the opposite thing, which is what I just mentioned. Why didn't somebody say, hey, if you would take the risk, take a little risk here of dropping the interest rate at the Fed level, that will help on those mortgages, it will help on those car interest rates, and it'll help on consumer finance. Nobody said that. What's wrong with it? I don't understand. What are these people doing? They're not even help. They're not trying. So no, immigration was mentioned a couple of times. I was proud of Fed Chair Powell for mentioning that the outflow instead of the inflow is probably impacting the amount of the supply of labor that's not there right now. In other words, he said 3 times at least, we have the number of people employed coming down, but the number of people that are available to go to work is going down also. And that's because of what I've been talking about, inflation. I mean, immigration. You got no 3 million people coming in and you got 1 million people going out. That's a big hit on the total available situation in terms of jobs. But nobody put it that way. Why didn't anybody say, oh, I get it? And how about the long-term impact of that? Is that going to be setting up a situation where the jobs market is fine? Okay, so you don't need to lower interest rates because you need to get more jobs, but where, again, inflation goes down because you got more productivity. Oh my goodness. Yeah, so tariffs, but nothing about government employment going down, nothing about government expenses going down, nothing about the tariffs creating more revenue for the government, nothing about AI. None of those things were mentioned today. And by the way, this was the final thing. This was the final straw. I'm not sure that I would have done the video if it wasn't for this final one. He says labor data is the best data that the Fed gets. Do you remember the Fed's labor data, the labor data that the Fed used all last year? It was the last 2 years. The labor data was horrifically wrong. It wasn't even in the ballpark of being right. It was so bad. It was like 900,000 jobs go poof. They're still adjusting it for last year, and we're still seeing jobs go poof. Just today, I saw a headline that was talking about more of the jobs that we thought we had last year that never existed. And so this is the Fed that you're paying 420 PhDs to run and Powell to head up, and he thinks that their labor data is the most important data that they get. It's the best data that they get, and that we should be paying all of these Fed PhDs in order to get us labor data that is completely moronically incorrect. All right, well, there you go. I've got the rant out of the way. I think that this is the most ridiculous Fed ever. The stock market, of course, went down after he talked. While he was talking, I didn't look even to see the timing on it. Tesla has gone down a bit more as a result of the Fed's numbers and their decision. This is very, very sad. I think most people, maybe the stock market went down because given the Fed's opinion right now, I don't think they'll cut this year. I don't think they'll cut September. I don't think they'll cut the rest of the year because they're waiting for. And they can just say, "Oh no, we're still waiting." We think that the tariffs are still going to have an impact in March of 2026. Yeah, it takes that long for it to get through the system. March of 2026. That's when it'll happen. Okay, so anyway, later tonight we will have Brian Wang. He will be with me. That'll probably come out about 5:15 California time. I probably will not now do a show at 7:45, unless there's something big that I think needs to be talked about. And normal programming tomorrow, I will put up the card again. Now this becomes even more important. If you didn't watch it last night, Nicholas Gibbs, I'll put the card right here. Go back and take a look at that in light of what we just learned from the Fed. I hope that's all I really want to say. But if not, I'll cover it when I get with Brian later in the evening. All right, it's been great. Let me relax. It's been great talking to you.